Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this month's Altitude, which is NATS monthly live stream. So this afternoon, we are going to be focusing specifically on the recruitment for trainee air traffic controllers, and also talking you through what it means to be an air traffic controller, to give a little bit of insight into air traffic control as a career. My name is Helen Fuge, and I am Head of Talent and HR Services here at NATS, and I will be the host for today's session, but I will also play a slightly different role at the beginning. So part of my role is to be in charge of talent here. So I will also, for any of you that are new, obviously, to what air traffic control is, and also the process of applying to be an air traffic controller, is I will also give you a little bit more information about what we do from an assessment perspective, which hopefully will be useful. I'm also absolutely delighted to have with me today Kim and Nikki. Kim and Nikki are both air traffic controllers, and we have the opportunity to work with Kim and Nikki in the next hour to really understand more about what it's like to do this role in real life. So, recruitment. Obviously, we've just relaunched and we're really excited, and this is the first time since the pandemic that we have gone actively out to go and find new air traffic controllers, and it's very, very exciting for us. What I wanted to do is to give you a little bit of insight in terms of what that application process looks like and why the application process looks the way that it does. So there are three key stages to the application process in becoming an air traffic controller. So you would start with an application, and at that point, we would invite you to undertake something that we call stage one testing. And that stage one testing consists, and it might sound a little bit intimidating, and it's not meant to, and I promise you it's not as scary as it sounds, but to complete 9 ability tests. And they are really looking at mental abilities required to be an air traffic controller. So to go into a little bit more detail on that, those 9 ability tests will include areas such as spatial orientation, and I'm sure you'll all agree with me that's an absolute essential skill that we would be looking for an air traffic controller. The ability to concentrate, again, very, very fundamental in terms of what we're looking for a good air traffic controller. Reaction speed, also thinking about logical thinking. So there are multiple things that we are testing for at that phase. You do have to pass all tests in order to proceed on to the next stage. And it usually takes around 75 minutes to pass or to get through those tests. So again, I think it's really important that if this is a career that you're interested in, to be aware of what that looks like, but also being very open the time commitment that goes into that, because it's not a quick testing process. From here, obviously, if you've got through those 9 stages of testing, you would be then invited to stage 2 testing, which consists of 2 other areas. So the first area that we look at in stage 2 testing is situation judgment test. So this is looking at you being presented with scenarios, and we're looking to see how you respond to those scenarios. And then also, as our second stage of testing, we do a personality questionnaire. Now, with the personality questionnaire, there is no right or wrong. This is very much centered on your personality traits. And that enables us, again, to look at your personality. And it also feeds into our stage 3 process, where we may want to probe a little bit more on certain traits that have come out through your personality questionnaire. So again, we would look for you to complete both stages, and if you are successful with both stage 1 and stage 2, you are then invited to the final stage of assessment, which is stage 3. One new addition from a assessment perspective for air traffic control for this year is we're actually going to move to virtual assessment for all assessment phases. And this is quite a big move for us as an organisation, and it's also a very intentional move for us. There are 2 key reasons for us moving to virtual assessment. One is social mobility, so making sure that for anybody who wants to apply to be an air traffic controller, that actually there's easy access in order to go through that process. There isn't the expectation that you're travelling and perhaps travelling all over the country to attend. It's also in service of our aspiration as an organisation to really think about our carbon footprint. Again, if we were holding assessment centres, we'd be travelling across the UK and beyond. And if we think about the amount of resource that we would have going into that, it's really thinking about how we can be more effective as an organisation. So virtual assessment is what we now offer. Now, stage 3 looks at, again, the competency and capabilities that we're looking for an air traffic controller. So we would look at a specific air traffic control knowledge test as part of that testing. There is a group discussion that looks at scenarios, and we also then move into individual assessment, individual interviews as part of that process. That is done as a day assessment. You would have a pool of assessors that would assess you, and candidates need to pass all stages of assessment in order to then become an air traffic controller. So that's a very high level summary of what that process looks like, and probably a really good segue into some of the conversation that I want to have with Kim this afternoon. But before I do that, what I would like to do is just to get Kim to do a high level introduction into herself, how long she's been with NATS, but also a little bit of an overview of her role as an air traffic controller. So Kim, are you happy to provide that introduction?
Yeah. Hi everyone, my name is Kim. I am a TC Luton and Stansted controller. I'm based on the south coast at Swanwick. I started with NATS in 2012. I validated on Luton, which was my very first sector, in 2017, and then Stansted I validated in 2021. Prior to joining NATS, I worked at Heathrow Airport in airfield operations, so I was a marshaller. So I actually did the job that most people think air traffic control is, and I marshalled aircraft at that. And so to give a bit of an overview about what an approach radar controller does, so we take aircraft from a multitude of directions. We get fed by various different sectors, and my job is basically to put them in a nice line, all in trail, put them on final approach, make sure they're all ready for landing, and then hand them over to the tower controllers.
And I think linked to that, Kim, it would be really interesting if you're happy to do an overview of the different validations, because I think anybody joining the call today may not have the familiarity of the fact that you can obviously be trained in different sectors. So are you happy just to do a headline summary?
Yes, very of what I know. So from the ground, on the ground, you have tower controllers, aerodrome controllers, and they will handle everything that's on the ground. So on the manoeuvring area, so as aircraft and vehicles are taxiing around the airport, they're the ones that give the takeoff and landing clearances to aircraft, and they will pass them on to either approach controllers like myself, and we deal with everything that's fairly close to the airport. So I'd say within maybe 30 to 50 miles and less would be approach controllers, and then kind of I'd say above it, but beyond that you've got area controllers. So we do have area controllers within the terminal control centre, and also you've got area control based at Swanwick. You also have area control that's based at Prestwick, and these tend to do much higher level stuff. Aircraft in the cruise, aircraft overflying UK airspace, that will be handled by area controllers. So you've got 3 different ratings. You've got aerodrome, approach, and area.
Perfect. That's great, Kim. Thank you. And obviously I've talked through at a high level what the application process looks like. Can you talk me through how you found that experience? So when you applied to become an air traffic controller, how did you find the application process and the assessment?
So I got in on my 3rd try.
Okay.
So I am the golden child of perseverance. So when I first applied, I was 18, and I'd never heard of air traffic before. I'd been introduced to it through doing and applying to something else for the RAF. And I thought, sure, how hard could it be? I'll give it a bash. And walked into the first assessment centre and totally blindsided. I had no clue what the application process looked like. This would have been back in the early 2000s. So there was no social media, really. There wasn't a lot of information about it, which is why social media and podcasts like this are so great, because I could obviously do air traffic, but having that preparation for the test would have been so helpful. I did the first one. I didn't even make it out of the first stage, to be honest. I was useless because I was so young. I was 18. I didn't have a clue what I was walking into. So I went away to carry on doing what I'd originally planned to do, which was medicine. I tried again when I was 22. I got all the way through to the final stage. Had to travel all the way to London to do it. And it was very much, I guess, old school assessment centre back then. Still with the group exercise, still with the interview, but it wasn't competency based or anything. It was, can you build an airport, and do you know how to handle an aircraft emergency or something? And didn't make it through that time either. Took some time, thought about how I could be better. What did I learn from it? How could I go into the next time? Because there was definitely going to be a next time. And, absolutely ate it and get through. Reapplied when I was 26 at the time. And it had all changed very slightly by then. It was based at Whiteley at NATS. And yeah, I was prepared. I knew I really wanted to do this. I'd read up on all the literature that they'd sent me. I'd been practicing interview techniques so that I knew how to do the job, but it was very much, how do I present this information to the interviewers? How do I let them know that this is what I want to do, that I have the skills, that I'm worth the investment? And yeah, third time through, and I started 2012. 2012. Yeah.
And Kim, and I'm delighted to have Nikki back with us as well. So hi, Nikki.
Sorry, technical problems this end.
No problem. I had the same issue myself, Nikki, so lovely to see you back. But before I move on to yourself, Nikki, to do an introduction, Kim, one thing I'm really curious about is that dedication to get into the role. So just tell me a little bit about why you had been so keen to pursue this career, because actually that is a lot of commitment, isn't it, to go through 3 times to become an air traffic controller?
So when I was first introduced to it, it was when I was applying for the RAF for a bursary. And whatever route or whatever position you want to apply for in the RAF, you have to do the aptitude test, and they're standard. Every applicant has to do the aptitude test. That includes air traffic control. I did not make it through the interview stage for the RAF, but the debrief was, really recommend you look into doing air traffic control. Like, your aptitude scores were really good. Definitely have a look. And they gave me some information, and I had a read, and I just thought, this looks quite interesting. It's got some responsibility. It looks like it would be diverse. So, every day would be different. I don't know. So I'd put it in, but never really be 100% committed. I wanted to be a doctor, and then finished my degree. Was a little bit lost. Had decided by this point, don't want to be a doctor. It's not what I thought it was going to be. What do I do now? And my dad suggested I get a job at my local airport in airport security. So I did, just to get some money, and that's when I really fell in love with aviation, like hard. It was late in life, but I fell hard for aviation. And I was exposed to air traffic when I met air traffic controllers, and I'd listened to the air traffic control frequency, and it was like, yeah, this sounds amazing. All the air traffic controllers that I met were just amazing people, and that's when I really started focusing. So it used to be an air traffic control book that used to tell you all about air traffic, and I read that cover to cover. Whenever I got the opportunity, I was talking to air traffic controllers, or I was up visiting Heathrow Tower when I worked there, and just finding and gleaning all of this information. And the more I found out about it, the more I just thought, this is absolutely what I want to do. This is 100% what I want to do. And that was what inspired me to keep going, really. To me, there was no option. But, if they'd have told me on the third try that was it, I would have had to have accepted it. But up until then, everything I did was with the goal of air traffic.
Thanks, Kim. And what a step change from being a doctor.
Yeah.
And Nikki, delighted to have you here. So, Nikki, for the benefit of the audience today, are you happy to do a high-level introduction to yourself, your career with NATS, and your role?
Yeah, sure. So I joined NATS back in 1998, so quite a few years ago now, in fact, coming up to my 25-year anniversary. And a bit like Kimmy, it wasn't something that I particularly wanted to do from a younger age. It wasn't something I was very aware of. So I was doing a university degree up at Hull in history, so absolutely nothing to do with aviation whatsoever. And then in 1997, I went down to South Africa to watch the British and Irish Lions play rugby. Rugby is a very big passion of mine. And my dad was cabin crew on British Airways, so I said, if you can get a flight down to Johannesburg, we can go and watch the rugby together. So we went down and did that. And whilst I was down there, I got to know the rest of the crew. We were down there, I think, about 5 or 6 days. On the way back, the captain said to me, would you like to come into the cockpit for takeoff? And back then, before sort of 9/11, it was much easier to get inside an airport cockpit. So I got in, he gave me a headset and said, we're just talking to air traffic about the best way to get out to Johannesburg because there's lots of thunderstorms around and we're just having a debate. So I sat there listening with this headset, not really understanding everything that was going on, but fascinated by the discussion between the controller and the captain. So we took off, we managed to get ourselves around the thunderstorms, headed back for London. I went back to my seat and the captain said, please come back into the cockpit if you'd like to for landing into Heathrow. So not one to miss an opportunity, I took that. And again, fascinated, just coming in, listening to all the different voices, the instructions, what was going on. So by the time I got off that aircraft, I remember turning to my dad and said, I know what I want to do. And he said, oh, do you want to be a pilot? And I said, no, I want to be the controller. So from that point on, I was lucky enough to find there was an advert for NATS. It was in the papers at that time. There was no sort of internet recruitment going on. So very old school. A friend of my mum's, we realised, was actually an assistant at West Drayton, which is now closed down, but that was the old sort of London Control Centre. So I managed to get myself a visit there, found out a bit more what was going on, and that was how my application process started. So I came down to London, did a few sets of the different tests and the interviews, very similar to what Kim went through, and was lucky enough to be accepted and came in from there. So I did that, I was posted to Birmingham, and from 2008, I've been up here at Manchester.
Brilliant. That's amazing. And what an inspiring story in terms of why you wanted to get into air traffic control, in terms of the experience that you had. One thing I'm really intrigued by for both of you actually is how it felt the first time you were let loose on live traffic. How did that feel?
It was nerve-wracking. I mean, we spoke on simulators for like 6 months to a year, and then you get very used to doing that. You know the voices on the other end of the simulators because they're people in the same building, so you know who they are. But my first one for me was at Aldergrove Airport in Belfast, and I'd gone across there for 6 weeks training, which they used to do as part of the college course. And I remember sitting there with my instructor beside me, and he'd been doing the job, and he said, okay, this EasyJet that's on final, I'd like you to clear it to land. And I sort of looked at him like, you actually want me to do it? And he's like, this is your job. This is what you're going to do for the rest of your career. Off you go. And so I cleared this EasyJet to land, and the voice came back and repeated the instruction. It landed, and just a moment of absolute wow, I did that. And you never forget your first aircraft.
How about yourself, Kim?
Same, never forgot it. It was an Aer Lingus, and it'd been building up to it all day. And my instructor was saying, okay, so are you ready? And I'm like, yeah. And he said, don't worry about it, you'll just do one instruction. This is what you're going to say, one instruction. You know, class has been ripped off, done. So, okay, I can do one instruction. We did it, and he said, do you know what you're going to say? And I said, yes. And the aircraft checked in, and like Nikki said, it wasn't the voice I was used to. There were all the different accents. And I gave the instruction, thinking, job done. And my instructor went, and now carry on. Like, oh no, I have to keep doing this now. I have, it's not just one and done. He's like, no. Do the sector, control the sector. And you get used to it, but like Nikki said, so different from the simulators. Yeah. Very similar because the simulator is very good, but the different paces of the way that pilots talk, the different phraseology that some of them use, that you can have, you'll be talking to one of the flight crew, and then in the next transmission it's a different member of that flight crew. So, they've switched, and it's just, hang on, you're not the voice I was just talking to. So it's just that, it's interesting and exciting, and I still remember it. Amazing.
And I'm sure one of the areas this afternoon that people who are tuning in are really keen to understand a little bit about is obviously it's a safety critical role, and with that, I'm sure there are challenges. But I suppose what I'm keen to know about really is what are the best parts? So for you personally, and I'll come to each of you separately, what do you feel are the best parts? But equally, what does a bad day look like for an air traffic controller? So Nikki, let me come to you first. What are the best parts?
The best parts, there's loads and loads of best jobs. So the best parts were achieving my validations, first of all. So that's managing to qualify my license at the airports I've worked at. Also now I'm an assessor and an instructor and an examiner. So getting new controllers through who join us from the college, having, like us, never spoken to a live aircraft before. And then 6 months down the line, they're passing their assessments and you're thinking, yeah, I helped them to do that. I encouraged them. I was able to teach them and pass on my knowledge. So that's a really satisfying part of the job. Other good days, I got to work at Lancaster Bomber and talk to that as it came on a fly past Manchester, and to see that out the window and be talking to the pilot, it was just one of those top days in the job that you never forget. So there's some really good parts to the job.
And I suppose on the flip side, Nikki, there's probably days of the job that you won't forget for other reasons. Are you able to share, I suppose, not wanting to say bad experiences, but challenging experience that you've had in the role?
Yeah, I mean, we all have days where you go home and you think, oh, maybe I could have done that better, or think things that went wrong, and we self-critique a lot as controllers. I think you're always looking at your performance and thinking afterwards, yeah, that was fine, it was okay, but I could have done better. In terms of bad days for the job, I've only had what I would really consider one bad day, and that was back in 2002. So a long time ago, 21 years ago, I was working at Birmingham Airport, and a plane that I'd just cleared for takeoff crashed on the runway. It got airborne, it crashed. It turned out later on they hadn't de-iced the plane properly, so the controls on the wings that keep the aircraft level weren't working. They were frozen. It was a small business jet, 5 passengers on, fully fueled to go to America, and it just crashed on the runway, and they didn't have a chance of survival, unfortunately. So that's a memory that will unfortunately always remain with me. But what I take from that, first of all, was there was nothing I could have done to prevent that. It wasn't something I did, or anything I could have done differently wouldn't have changed the outcome of that situation. And also the support that I got from that. Once the incident happened, the fire brigade were on scene within minutes. I was removed from position because they don't want a controller who's had that kind of shock to be sat there. So I was taken away from the situation down to the restroom. They made sure that one of my colleagues was sat with me for the next couple of hours, that I wasn't left on my own wondering what's going on, what's happening. And just the support from colleagues, as much as the general manager actually made tea and coffee for everyone, which we've never seen before. So you know how serious it was at that point. But after that, they made sure that there was help available to me if I wanted to talk to anyone. We've got systems in the company, 24-hour support lines that you can ring if you've had a bad day at work or just a bad day at home. So the company really does look after you. And you find in those circumstances when things go really wrong, that's when you feel it most. So my colleagues at Birmingham on that day, the 5 or 6 people that worked on my shift, they're like a family at that time. They look after you. I wasn't allowed to go home by myself. Someone drove me home and just made sure I was all right. So yes, you can have really bad days. Thankfully, they're extremely rare. But the support networks around you just really helped me get through that. Yeah.
And I think a remarkable story in terms of how you were able to get through that as well. And like you said, with the support there and a horrible experience to go through. So thank you so much for being so open and sharing. Kim, obviously, let's start with your best day. I'm hoping that your worst day may not be quite as severe as Nikki's, but talk us through in terms of what gives you that sort of energy and motivation in terms of the role, but equally the days that you find hardest.
The best day again was the validation. So my first validation, that was simultaneously possibly the best and worst, just from the fact that this is the make or break potentially of your career. But it was the best day because I validated. Bad days, I couldn't even describe them as bad. They're just the challenges. So if you go in and it's a bad weather day, obviously that is challenging. But simultaneously, that's one of the best things about the job is the teamwork and my colleagues, because when you have something like that, even if you have other kind of incidents, if you have emergencies, for example, like Nikki said, you're not on your own. You are working as a team, and that is when we do some of our best work, and when the flight crews as well do some of their best work. It really is. Some of the proudest that I felt is on really bad weather days, walking away going, my word, the pilots today were impeccable. My colleagues today were impeccable. And that's when the training really shines through as well for us. And yeah, I think that's some of my best and worst days.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kim. And I suppose one thing as well that would be really great to hear from both of you is what advice would you give to people that are keen to become air traffic controllers? And specifically, I suppose I'm really keen to hear, because we do have not as many women that currently apply to be air traffic controllers. What advice would you give to other women looking to become air traffic controllers?
Do it. Do it. This is why I'm a big pusher of diversity. It's a very important topic to me. Because for exactly that reason, when you look around the work environment, the ops room as well, there aren't as many women as there are men. I think we sit at less than 30% in NATS specifically. Externally, in the UK, 14.7% of air traffic controllers are women. And I try very hard to represent the role and represent women in air traffic. But the only way that we can make it better is if more women apply. So come and join us, please.
And are you happy, because I know that you're also involved in other organisations as well, sort of promoting that. Are you happy to give a little bit of an overview there?
Yeah, so I'm a trustee for a charity that was started in 2022, and it's called Aviation in Reach. And the aim of Aviation in Reach is to provide mentoring to those underrepresented demographics within the aviation industry. So that's pilots, air traffic controllers and aircraft engineers. And we're hoping to do that through mentoring. So we'll partner mentees with experienced and expert mentors from the relevant fields. We've got one mentee cohort going through at the moment. And for example, we have people who've never managed to visit an air traffic control tower before who are now able to go and do that through the partnership with their mentor, which is amazing. So it's not just women for Aviation Reach. I don't want to stress that. It's for all of the underrepresented demographics. So ethnic minorities, women, possibly socioeconomic is something we want to look into in the future. But so we're very new, so we've had to make sure that we focus on, just the two at the moment. And yeah, it's really, really exciting stuff. And the things that the mentees are achieving and the potential that's out there is so inspiring to me, really inspiring.
Thank you, Kim. And Nikki, what I'm going to do is come to you now with the same question in terms of advice you would give anybody looking to become an air traffic controller, and then we will open up for some Q&A because we've seen lots coming through already this afternoon. So Nikki, any advice that you would give to somebody looking to be an air traffic controller?
Yeah, I think as like Kim's first words, do it. It's something I've never regretted, and I can't see myself doing anything else at all. In terms of advice, be prepared to work hard. It's tough. It's tough to get through. It's tough at the college, but it's achievable. And you find at the college you end up very close knit with the people on your course because you're going through it together. So you end up supporting each other. Like you would get together in the evenings. A lot of us live together, so you'll sit there with flashcards testing each other and talking about things. If I didn't catch something the first time or was struggling, someone else would be able to explain it to me again. So we talk through. When I went through the college, it was down at Bournemouth Airport, and on a lunchtime we used to walk down to the cafe at the airport and watch sort of the planes coming in and out, and we'd sit and talk about different aircraft types. I wasn't particularly good at recognising them when I started. I knew a Concorde and a 747, but the rest all looked a bit the same to me. And there were people on my course who were much more knowledgeable about that sort of stuff, and they'd say, okay, so the 777, this is what you're looking for on this one, this is how you differentiate between another type of aircraft. So it's really working together, making sure you've got the support of your friends and family behind you, because it is a very tough course and you're going to be full on. You're not going to have a great deal of time for social stuff while you're doing the course. But so it's making sure you've got that support network ready and you're prepared for it. But if you put that work in, the rewards on the other side are absolutely worth it.
That's great, Nikki. Thank you. Right, we have got lots of questions to get through. So what would say to the audience this afternoon is we'll try and get through as many as possible. And thank you to Nikki and Kim so far in terms of the input, in terms of their personal experiences. One thing that's probably a bit of an extension of what we've just said, really, in terms of advice, is Victoria has asked if there is one thing a person wanting to be a NATS controller should know before taking the job, what would that be?
You are a mobile grade. So you could get posted anywhere across the UK. So if you're going in with your sights set on Swanwick or Prestwick or Manchester, just know it's not 100% that you'll get the speciality that you want. So you might go in wanting aerodrome and actually end up doing approach or area. You might want to be posted north of the country and end up at the south, or vice versa. So just be prepared going into this. You could go anywhere in the country.
And to add to that, and Nikki will come on to your advice on that as well. There was also a question from Vivian asking about, can you choose where you want to be based? And Kim's absolutely right. So what we would seek at the point of application is preferences in terms of where you would want to be based. But obviously, because we're looking at everything based on skill and aptitude, it will all then be dictated in terms of perhaps sector or area that you're covering, and also demand. Obviously, we need to look at where there is demand for us as a business in terms of being able to provide air traffic controllers. So obviously, absolutely, if we are able to meet the preferences of individuals, we will absolutely do so. But Kim, I think that's a really important thing to highlight, is the fact that actually that can't always be possible. So it's that recognition really that actually you could be posted outside of your area of preference. And I think that's really important to understand before undertaking the application process. Anything you think, Nikki, that a NATS controller should know before applying for the job, or a potential controller?
I think it's do your research, learn as much as you can about air traffic control. I mean, when I started applying, there wasn't much information apart from like a small book that sort of talked to you about air traffic control. But nowadays with the internet, there is so much information out there to sort of find out about the different airports. There's loads of YouTube videos and clips about aviation, about air traffic, views from inside towers. So watch those, pick up as much information as you can. If you can get a visit to your local airport, whether it's a NATS one or not, try and get a visit into the control tower and see what happens for real. And that will give you a real understanding and background information that will just help you with the application process.
Thank you, Nikki. Beriket has asked a question which is probably more one for me, so you can breathe a sigh of relief for a moment, Kim and Nikki, which is around whether there's an apprenticeship for air traffic controllers. The answer is yes, there is. As an organisation, we are currently reapplying to be on the register of apprenticeship providers, and that's not because we've not done our job properly, it's because we had to pause learners. And actually, in order to continue to be an employer provider, you have to continuously have apprentices on programme for 6 months, and obviously due to the pandemic we did pause training for a period of time. So there is currently an apprenticeship that is set out for air traffic control. It's decoupled from validation, and that's on purpose because it only takes you to a certain level of training for air traffic control. So if you do apply to be an air traffic controller with us, we are looking hopefully to bring the apprenticeship standard back in probably in the autumn of this year. That's what we're aiming for. And what that means is you would continue and hopefully be successful in becoming a valid air traffic controller, but partway through your training, you would also receive an additional qualification of being an apprentice in air traffic control as well. So a really good question. One, like I said, that's probably not as easy to answer on the basis that we're not back on the register yet. We are absolutely set up to be on that register. So we will make sure, obviously via communication channels, and that's .aero, that we will make people aware at the point that we're able to deliver the apprenticeship standard again. So thank you for that question. Liam has asked, what does an average shift look like? So if you're able to give a bit of insight in terms of your shift and what does that look like?
Very different. Days vary. For me, I do both the tower up at Manchester and the approach radar. So I can either spend a shift up in the visual control room where we'll be doing the landings, taking offs and moving planes around on the ground, or I can spend the day in the approach radar room doing a job very similar to what Kim does, but doing it for Manchester approach. Today, for example, my shift is a 12 to 8, so I came in at 12, I did an hour and a half in radar, then I'm on here for a couple of hours, and then later on this afternoon I'm carrying out an assessment on another controller. So he, unfortunately we were on a ski trip in January when he injured his leg, and he's not been able to control for 3 months because he can't get up into the visual control room, because although we've got a lift that goes most of the way, there's 2 flights of stairs at the end, and when he was on crutches he couldn't get up. So he's now fit to work up in the tower. He's done 3 or 4 days back with an instructor sat alongside him just to make sure he's happy. I'll carry out an assessment on him, final assessment, all aboard, and hopefully he'll get his license back. And then the rest of my shift will be writing up the paperwork for that, making sure it's done. And if I've got any time at the end, I'll probably get a chance to do some more controlling by myself. So some days are very, very different depending on the requirements of the job.
Thank you, Nikki. Kim, how about yourself? Is there a standard day?
No, there is in terms of we go, and I will always brief before I go into the ops room, and then I'll find out whether I'm on Luton or Stansted. I can switch between both during the day, and also whether or not I'm instructing anybody. So like Nikki, I'm an instructor, which I really, really enjoy. I find it very rewarding to train controllers, both brand new and also controllers that are already valid that might be extending onto another sector, so taking up 2 instead of just 1. And we tend to do, depending on how busy it is, we could do anything from half an hour, 45 minutes in one session, and then minimum of half an hour off. And then we'll just keep doing that during the day. Like Nikki, if I've been instructing someone, then I'll also have reports to write up, training reports, and that just helps discuss what went on during the day, pass them any feedback, things they did really, really well, things they need to work on, and it helps them progress through their training and also have that visual representation of how they're doing. And then, yeah, shifts are anything from 7 hours for a morning shift up to 9 hours for a night shift.
Thank you, Kim. We've probably got time, and it's gone really quickly this afternoon, but probably one more question. And the question we have is, would you recommend any resources prior to the interview process? So was there anything that you found really valuable when you were prepping for your interview?
I read up on interview techniques. As I mentioned earlier, it's not just a case of, do you have the knowledge? You can have all the knowledge about air traffic in the world. If you can't present that well to interviewers, they're not going to know. They're not going to be able to see this amazing knowledge and skill that you have. So I spent a lot of time practicing that, because I hate interviewing. I've always been not great at it. It's something that's always put the fear in me, so I knew it was an issue. And yeah, just studying up on air traffic, aircraft recognition is a good one. A little bit about aircraft performance can't hurt. I remember when I applied, there was a little bit about aircraft performance in the initial testing from memory, but it might have changed. So I could be giving everyone deaf information.
Yeah, no teasers. We don't want to. Thank you, Kim. Nikki, yourself, anything that you utilised in preparation?
Yeah, so when I went through, they NATS sent out a booklet with the information that said where you needed to be and at what time, and it was about 6 or 7 pages, and it gave you quite a lot of information about how a particular sector worked. And they did say in the information letter, you will be asked questions on this.
Yeah.
And I remember going through the assessment, there was about 30 other people in the room, and one of the pages of the exams was basically questions on this booklet, and we found out at that time that probably half the people that turn up hadn't bothered to read and learn it, and so they just cast themselves out of it at that point. They didn't get any further. So if you're given information before, read it, learn it, understand it, make sure you've done that prep work. Don't just think you'll be able to get in and think, oh, I'll read it on the day, or I'll just look through it at once. So any prep work that you're advised to do, just really make sure you do it. The other thing for the interviews with myself, I remember was given a selection of model aircraft and was told to put them in the order that I would like to go for takeoff. And I thought, okay, so I put them in one order, and they asked me to explain the order. And I'd gone from what I considered the fastest to the slowest, because I thought that was the best way to do it. And then they asked me about wake turbulence, and they said, okay, so the bigger ones, everything's going to have to wait longer behind it. So I completely changed my order around. And I think during that interview, I must have had 5 different final orders with these planes. And I thought afterwards, they must think I'm a complete idiot. But I think what they were looking for was that I could justify each situation, why I'd done each one, and I could articulate why, and I could change a plan. And I think that's what they look for in control. It's not just that you have a plan and can do it, but you can change it if something happens. So I think that's really important.
Perfect. That's great, Nikki. Well, I'm afraid, although that's gone really quickly and we haven't been able to get to all questions, that does bring us to a close this afternoon. I hope that's given you all a flavour of both how to apply to be an air traffic controller, but what it also is like to be an air traffic controller. And I also want to say a massive thank you to Kim and Nikki for giving us their time this afternoon and giving us that insight. If you do want more insight in terms of what it's like to be a controller, you can follow both Kim and Nikki on Twitter. Now, let me just get this right, and if I get this wrong, then please let me know. So, Nikki, you're at Nikki Patterson 0, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Kim, you're at that_girl_atco.
Yes.
Perfect. I'm glad. And we'll make sure that we can send information out to follow as well. Also, please follow NATS in terms of our website as well, and keep informed via nats.aero. Like I said, I hope you found it useful this afternoon. Thank you all for joining. And those of you that are applying, best of luck with your application.